Human digestive system. So we just finished a unit on enzymes, and there are lots and lots of enzymes used to digest your food. So this is a good time to talk about the digestive system. And here's a guy from Nathan's hot dog eating contest, which is maybe the grossest thing in the world. Um, the process of digestion breaks food molecules into usable forms. So you got to think that when he's eating these, if you can call it eating, these hot dogs, he's probably not actually doing much digestion because he doesn't even chew the food. Num num. Okay, humans get the energy and materials they need to live by eating. So that makes us different from plants because plants can just absorb sunlight to get their energy. The organisms that we eat are made out of those 4 macromolecules that you spent all that time learning. The first one is carbohydrates, and I bet you can remember the others, so you can pause this and think of them. And I'll tell you now. I bet you got them. They are lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins will show up on your food labels, like on your cereal box. This will say it'll either be listed as carbohydrates or it might be listed as, they might be simple sugars and more complex sugars. This will be listed as fats, and the protein will be listed as protein. You won't see nucleic acids on the list, but they are in everything. So this is just an example of a macromolecule of a polymer that's digested into its monomers. So these molecules must be broken down by your body to simpler molecules so that we can use them. So if you have enzymes that break that bond and that bond and that bond and that bond, you will get these simple monomers. Nutrient overview. What are the monomers or the building blocks of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids? And so you have something that looks like this in your notes. So I want you to use a pencil and fill this stuff in, and then I'll do it with you. So you really should pause this right now, do your best with it, and then when you're all done with that page, it actually is split across a few pages. When you get through carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, turn this back on. So the polymer for carbohydrates is a polysaccharide. The dimer is a disaccharide, and the monomer is a monosaccharide. So all 3 of these words end with saccharide. Poly is many, di is 2, and mono is 1. So when you eat a hamburger roll or some bread, you've got starch, which is a polysaccharide. So an example of a polysaccharide is starch. And you'll break that down into a disaccharide, which will just be 2 sugar units. So maybe glucose to glucose or glucose to fructose. And then you'll break that bond and you'll just end up with 1 simple sugar, like for example, glucose. Lipid digestion, for the most part, what we're talking about are triglycerides. And you break those up into 2 monomers, glycerol and fatty acids. Protein digestion, the polymer is a polypeptide. The dimer, di, is a dipeptide. And then the monomer, I wish it were a monopeptide. It's an amino acid. And then nucleic acid digestion, the polymer is a nucleic acid. If you put polynucleotide here, that's totally fine. We're breaking that down into the monomer nucleotides. And then the nucleotides are broken into 3 things: a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogenous base. So this sugar is either ribose or deoxyribose. There's a phosphate group, and the base is either A, T, U, C, or G. So this is stuff you guys knew from a couple units before. What we're going to add this time are the enzymes used to get you from this step to this step, and this step to this step, and what organs that these molecules are digested in. So that's what we're going to do today. So you need enzymes to break down all of these molecules, and what we're going to do with the digestive system is talk about all the organs and some of the enzymes used to break this stuff down. So for example, here's starch, and if you break these bonds, you're going to get this thing, glucose, or some type of monomer. Here's fats. This is glycerol, and these things hanging down are fatty acids. You built these in a lab for me once. Here's glycerol, so if you break these bonds, you end up with glycerol and 3 fatty acids. And you can transport this stuff, all this stuff, through the blood, or more likely through the lacteals, which is like blood, to the parts of your body that need the fat. Here's protein digestion. if you break it right here, what you end up with are these amino acids. So you're breaking a polypeptide down into these single amino acids. This thing that's hanging off that looks different between them, this thing right here is the R group. So the R groups are in blue, and the nitrogen, carbon, carbon with an O part are the parts in black. And nucleic acids, first you're going to break them down like this. So you'll break the nucleic acids down to nucleotides like this. And then you'll actually have an enzyme that will break off the sugar, the phosphate, and the base. Quiz time. Lipids are broken down into what building blocks? So pause this and think of the answer. And I'm going to give you the answer now. It's fatty acids and glycerol. So you really need to know the monomers that make up all the polymers. Carbohydrates are broken down into what building blocks? Or this is another way of saying into what monomers? So another way to say that is which monomers make carbohydrates? And so the answer there are monosaccharides. Proteins are broken down into what building blocks? So a polypeptide is broken down into the little things that make up proteins. Again, the monomer is what I'm looking for. And so, so the monomer here is, I knew I messed that up, monomer. The monomer here is an amino acid. Nucleic acids are broken down into nucleotides. And so a nucleotide is the monomer of a nucleic acid. Nucleotides are broken down into what? They're broken into sugar phosphate base. Again, it's ribose or deoxyribose for the sugar. There's a phosphate group, and then the base has nitrogen in it, so we call it a nitrogenous base. And it could be A, T, C, G, or U. Okay, digestive system organs. So you can see the organs here. There's the mouth with the salivary glands that make saliva. The pharynx is here, it's the throat. Here's the esophagus, the stomach. The small intestine is all of this. There are other organs that secrete stuff into the small intestine. The yellow thing here is the pancreas, here's the liver, and here's the gallbladder. Once the food goes all the way through the small intestine, it goes here to the large intestine, and that is brought all the way out to the butt. And I didn't mean to write all over that. So the gastrointestinal tract. Gastro is for stomach, and intestinal are intestines. So this is the GI tract, we call it sometimes, and it digests and absorbs food. The food is getting absorbed into the blood for the most part. There's another body fluid that can absorb fat a little bit better, but you can just remember the blood. So here are the organs of the gastrointestinal tract. These are everything that food goes through. Mouth, pharynx or throat, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. I did not include the salivary glands, did not include this, the pancreas, didn't include the liver, didn't include the gallbladder, because although those help out, food does not actually go up into the liver. The food actually goes down the esophagus, to the stomach, to the small intestine, to the large intestine. Let's move this out of the way. So there are organs that help. They're called accessory organs. Organs that release secretions into the GI tract are the salivary glands, here, here, here. The gallbladder, which is this green one. I missed the liver, which is this pink one, the red one. And the pancreas, which is shown here in yellow. Lots of people have the gallbladder taken out and do just fine, but you definitely need your liver and your pancreas. So we'll talk about each of those in detail now, and then we'll go back to that organizer that showed all the different polymers being broken into dimers and monomers, and we'll talk about the enzymes that break them down, and that'll be our unit. So let's start out, almost there yet. Not quite there. Just one definition. A sphincter is a circular muscle that separates each compartment. So there's a sphincter at the top of your stomach to prevent food from going backwards. If you ever had acid reflux or heartburn, what's happening is that the acid from the stomach is going backwards here. And there's a thick layer of mucus in your stomach, but there's not a thick layer of mucus in your esophagus. It's a very thin layer. So the acid, if it goes back here, will kind of burn the esophagus a bit, and that's a pretty painful thing. It's really not good for you long term. It can cause esophageal cancer, but short term, it's probably not a big problem, but it does hurt. So that sphincter, if it's not working right, will cause heartburn, or sometimes if the stomach's just too full, it can happen. There's another sphincter here, and that's just a circular muscle that allows the food to stay here, and then when it opens, it allows the food to move on. There's a sphincter here between the small intestine and the large intestine, and then there are two sphincters here. One that will tell you, hey, you gotta go, and the other one that's voluntary, that will actually say, okay, now it's really time to go. One more thing before we get into the organs, movement of the GI tract. Here's a new term for you, peristalsis. This means that food is moved from one part of the body to another. So in other words, as you swallow, what's happening is that let's start it here. These circular muscles are contracting. There are longitudinal muscles and circular muscles. So the circular muscles right around here are relaxing, and the circular muscles here are contracting. As the food moves down, it just keeps going in a wave. So these are contracting. These are relaxing. So contraction and relaxation of the muscles moves in a wave down the muscular tube. So that happens through the esophagus and through the intestines. Here's a video, but I'll show it to you in class because it doesn't screen capture very well. I'll try to put it on its learning for you. What's the function of the gallbladder, liver, salivary glands, and pancreas? So quiz time. So all these things, food doesn't actually go through them. They just release secretions into the GI tract. So that's B. Put these organs into the right order. So please pause this, and I'll do it for you now. So pause it and then come back. So food enters the mouth first. So we got that one. And then it goes to the throat, which is called the pharynx. And then it goes down that tube to your stomach. So that tube is called the esophagus. And then it goes into the stomach, where it stays for a couple hours. And protein digestion starts there. Then the small intestine, which is actually really long. And then the large intestine. All right. Digestive system organs, the mouth. So chewing begins what we call the mechanical digestion of food, or the mechanical breakdown of food. First, you got to get it into teeny little pieces so the enzymes can get at it. Salivary glands. So here's the mouth, here's a salivary gland, here's a duct, and the salivary gland is brought into, the saliva is brought into the mouth through the ducts. Here's another one. So there are a couple things that the saliva does. One is that it moistens food so you can swallow it, and another is that it has an enzyme called salivary amylase. So salivary glands produce the enzyme salivary amylase. Look at this. It ends with ACE, just like all enzymes should. This actually breaks down carbohydrates. So it's a polysaccharide digesting enzyme, and it secretes that enzyme into the mouth. So you should know that food doesn't actually make it into these glands. Food is actually in the mouth. So the way that you'll mess this up if you mess it up, you might memorize that it's a polysaccharide digesting enzyme, and you might forget that a polysaccharide is just a complex carbohydrate. So carbohydrate digestion starts in the mouth. Polysaccharide digestion starts in the mouth. Same thing. Salivary amylase begins the chemical digestion, or the chemical breakdown of carbohydrates in the mouth. So chemical digestion means that bonds are breaking. If you put food into your blender or into your food processor and put it on, it's not breaking any bonds, it's just physically breaking it up, whereas the enzyme actually chemically breaks bonds. Okay, the pharynx, the throat, there's not much to say about that except everything is connected in the throat. You have little eustachian tubes from your ears. You have the sinuses, your nose, your mouth, your esophagus, your trachea, your ears, all kind of connect back here. Even your tear ducts connect back there. So anyway, here's your mouth. What happens is that this thing right here, when you swallow, this thing, the epiglottis, will close over here. So when you swallow, food should go this way and water should go this way. If you've ever been talking or laughing when you're eating, sometimes this thing will open and food or water will actually go this way. And that's a bad thing because this thing goes to your lungs. It's called the trachea. And you only want air going down to your lungs. So that's when you'll cough up the water. You want to only send food this way. If you ever get a piece of food lodged right here and you can't get it out, that's a dangerous thing. You're going to choke on whatever and hopefully get it out. But that can kill you. So the pharynx allows the passage of food and fluids to the esophagus, which is this, and air to the trachea, which is this. That's the one you can feel if you put your fingers up to your neck. That's the bumps of it. That's your trachea. Next one, esophagus. That's this thing. It goes to your, you can see it starting to empty out here into the stomach. Here's the diaphragm. It separates out the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. So here's your esophagus. It's really just a tube that goes to your stomach. Stomach. So this is kind of the first holding place for food. This starts protein digestion. So carbohydrate digestion begins in the mouth, protein digestion begins in the stomach, and there's an enzyme called pepsin, and the sad thing about this is it does not end in ACE. Too bad, huh? It's breaking our rules. Fun fact about protein digestion. You see this thing right here? The walls of the stomach are supposed to be really well protected with mucus. Once in a while they're not, and the acids and the enzymes there will start to break down um, the walls themselves. Very dangerous. That's called an ulcer. And I guess it's not always dangerous. I get them sometimes, but it's bad if it bleeds and starts to perforate. If there's a hole in it, that can be very, very bad. Okay, so fun fact about protein digestion. Your body is made out of protein. And so if you've got a protein digesting enzyme, you want to make sure you don't digest yourself. Hate when that happens. Really bad stuff. So pepsin has to be secreted. This is the enzyme that digests protein. Pepsin has to be secreted in an inactive form, so it doesn't digest you. So it won't digest the stomach wall, which is made out of protein. Pepsin is activated in the space inside the stomach, so in here, and this thing is protected by a nice thick layer of mucus. Yay, mucus. And so here's a picture of what happens if you have an ulcer that actually does go all the way through. And the problem here is that food can get into the body cavity and bring all that bacteria with it, which is a dangerous thing. Hydrochloric acid is what activates pepsin in the stomach. So you probably puked before, and when you do, you know it's burning your esophagus, so that therefore you know that the stuff in your stomach is acidic. And the reason it's acidic is it has that hydrochloric acid that has to activate pepsin. Okay, so I'm going to pause here because this is plenty long enough. Bye.